If Angra 3 were a soap opera, it would have already broken all records for episodes and dragging on. It started during the military regime, went through the return to democracy, blackouts, corruption scandals, changes in government, and the privatization of Electrobras. And, to this day, nothing. The plant that promised to guarantee the future has become a symbol of a country that can't put the past behind it. More than 40 years later, the government is trying to make the completion of Angra 3 possible, even if it costs more than 23 billion reais. Even though the technology is old, with updates, even though nuclear energy still divides opinions all over the world, Angra 3 has become a bureaucratic zombie that no one can bury, and now no one wants to leave it half-finished. Are we facing an energy solution or a museum of mistakes packaged as progress? Stay with us for the next few minutes and dive into this story of back-and-forth contradictions and monumental figures. In fact, Angra 3 is not just any project. Located in the municipality of Angra dos Reis, on the southern coast of Rio de Janeiro, the plant is part of the so-called Almirante Álvaro Alberto nuclear complex, where Angra 1 and Angra 2 are already in operation. The third unit has an estimated capacity of 1.4 gigawatt, enough in theory to supply a city with 4.5 million inhabitants. But unlike its older sisters, Angra 3 has become an unfinished giant. The construction of the plant occupies a strategic area close to the Serra do Mar, surrounded by dense vegetation and difficult to access. A location that required complex logistical and technical solutions along the Brazilian Federal Highway 101, and that ended up serving as a curtain for decades of delays and waste. The initial idea was to ensure energy autonomy in the country, which was growing rapidly. What we saw, however, was the symbol of a Brazil that comes to a standstill more than it builds. And now, whenever the prospect of resuming comes up, the question is, does it still make sense to continue with a project designed in the 1970s? The story of Angra 3 begins in a different Brazil. Still under the military regime, in the 1970s, the country decided to invest in nuclear energy as a symbol of progress and energy sovereignty. With the help of Germany, a cooperation agreement was signed for the construction of 8 nuclear power plants. Angra 3 was one of them, planned to be a replica of Angra 2 but with technical advancements. Construction began in 1984, driven by a centralized model and the belief that nuclear energy was the inevitable future. But reality soon knocked at the door. During the economic crisis of the 1980s, the absurd increase in financing costs and hyperinflation brought the project to a halt. In 1986, with less than 30% completed, work would only resume decades later, in 2009. The promise was to deliver Angra 3 in 2016, but Brazil was dealing with Operation Car Wash. Corruption scandals and embezzlement of funds blew up contracts and froze the project again in 2015. Since then, the motivation has changed. If before it was independence, now it's the pressure not to throw away a multi-billion investment. More than 10 billion reais have been invested. In a scenario where decarbonizing the energy matrix has become a global priority, Angra 3 has started to be promoted as a clean and constant alternative compared to the intermittency of solar and wind energy. But this shift is surrounded by controversies, technical doubts, and a history that's hard to erase: music. The Angra 3 nuclear power plant represents one of the most emblematic energy infrastructure projects in Brazil, both for its technical complexity and for the political and economic obstacles faced over more than 4 decades. The construction of Angra 3 began in 1984 based on the model of the Almirante Álvaro Alberto Nuclear Center. The Almirante Álvaro Alberto Nuclear Center, located in Angra dos Reis in Rio. The concept of Angra 3 was to replicate the technical industrial arrangement of Angra, based on kilowatt pressurized water reactor technology, which was then linked to Siemens. The standardization aimed to capture economies of scale, shorten deadlines, and take advantage of the engineering and workforce already qualified for the project. The reactor planned for Angra 3 is the standard KW 1300 pressurized water reactor with a net electric power capacity of 1,405 megawatt. The plant's engineering was designed to integrate the main components already purchased in the 1980s, such as vessels, steam generators, pressurizer, and primary pumps, requiring conservation and requalification programs in accordance with current standards. The construction was halted in 1986, when only 30% of the civil works had been completed. Brazil was going through a foreign debt crisis and inflation was eroding infrastructure budgets. With the project halted, structures were left exposed to the elements, while materials deteriorated. The lack of proper preventive maintenance contributed to the degradation of several systems, including electrical and hydraulic ones, which were already partially installed. The discussion about the project gained momentum in the early 2000s, especially after the energy rationing in 2001, which exposed the vulnerability of Brazil's electricity matrix, heavily dependent on hydroelectric plants. The federal government, through electronuclear, resumed studies on technical and economic feasibility, taking into account not only the completion of the plant, but also the updating of engineering, especially the safety systems, environmental licensing, and emergency plan. In 2009, the official resumption of construction was announced, with operations scheduled to begin in 2016. The goal was to complete the remaining civil construction, install the stored equipment, update the digital control systems, and enable the integration of the plant into the National Interconnected System, the CNL. The planned investment was around 10 billion reais, with the energy price set in 2009 at 148.65 reais per megawatt hour, according to the values at that time. In the following years, the execution progressed, but at a slower pace than expected. Factors such as logistical delays, licensing obstacles, and external interferences affected the schedule. In 2015, the project was halted again after the corruption allegations revealed by Operation Car Wash. With the construction work suspended, several contracts were terminated, and the structures were once again exposed to deterioration. In 2018, the National Energy Policy Council revised the price cap for energy from Angra 3 to 480 reais per megawatt hour, an adjustment that highlighted the scale of costs and the commercial unfeasibility of the project in its original form. In an attempt to unlock the project, Angra 3 was included in the Investment Partnerships Program. The Investment Partnerships Program in 2019. A study conducted by Banco Nacional de Desenvolvimento Econômico e Social estimated that 23 billion reais would be needed to complete the plant. With the privatization of Eletrobras in 2022, control of Eletronuclear was transferred to the state-owned Angra. Eletrobras remained a partner without control, holding about 36% of the voting capital and approximately 68% of the total capital. In 2025, it began the process of divesting this stake. This model raised doubts about governance, resource allocation, and the project's ability to cooperate. Currently, Angra 3 is between 66% and 67% physically completed. The main buildings, including the reactor building, machine room, electrical building, and water treatment station, are partially constructed. As for the challenges, the completion of Angra 3 is seen by many experts in the sector as strategic for diversifying Brazil's electricity matrix and ensuring energy security, especially in a scenario of climate instability and transition to clean energy sources. Angra 3 is not alone in the club of never-ending projects. Brazil has a history of public projects that take decades and consume fortunes before becoming reality, if they ever do. But Angra 3 stands out because of its technical profile, high cost, and sensitive location. In Brazil, the Belo Monte power plant also faced critical and environmental delays, but it was delivered. The Salvador Metro, another symbol of political back and forth. It took more than 14 years to get off the ground. But none of these projects had as many pauses and restarts as Angra 3. On the international stage, nuclear projects also face challenges. The Olkiluoto 3 reactor in Finland took 18 years to be completed. In the United States, the Vogto plant had its costs tripled and faced delays of almost a decade. Angra 3 is a portrait of how Brazil handles highly complex projects, with improvisation, institutional instability, and little technical continuity. While the world discusses nuclear fusion, Brazil is trying to finish a project conceived during the Cold War. And then the question remains, are we chasing the future or dragging ourselves through the past? In fact, if completed, Angra 3 could provide constant and clean energy for millions of Brazilians. Nuclear energy has the advantage of being dispatchable, meaning it works 24 hours a day. Unlike intermittent sources like solar and wind, the plant would help reduce dependence on hydroelectric power during dry seasons, which gives the system more security. In addition, the restart promises to generate thousands of direct and indirect jobs, supply the national industry, and attract investments to the sector. But the future also carries risks: delays, increased costs, technological obsolescence, and social rejection. Angra 3 may be a technical solution, but without competent management, it runs the risk of turning into a new scandal of nuclear proportions. The country will need to decide: finish Angra 3 no matter the cost, or accept the loss once and for all, because in this case, a middle ground is the worst possible choice. Thank you for watching this video until the end. What do you think about Angra 3? Is it really feasible to resume construction and finish the project? Leave your opinion in the comments below. I'll be happy to read all of them. That's it for now. A big hug, and see you in the next video.